Hey guys, tonight we are going to abandon our modern refrigerators and hygienic pantries to wander the narrow, muck-filled alleys of the Middle Ages in search of a midnight snack. We're going to find out exactly what fast food looked like 500 years before the invention of the drive-thru, exploring the greasy, salty, and often dangerous world of medieval street eats. You probably won't survive this culinary adventure without contracting at least a mild case of worms, but that's a problem for future you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is. I love seeing who is awake with us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes. It is dark, that heavy, impenetrable darkness that only exists before the invention of streetlights. The air in your room is cold and damp, clinging to your skin like a wet sheet. You roll over on your mattress, which, if we are being honest, is really just a rough burlap sack stuffed with straw that hasn't been changed since the last harvest. It rustles loudly beneath you, a dry, scratching sound that echoes in the small space. You aren't alone here. Around you, the rhythmic breathing and occasional snoring of your family members, or perhaps just the strangers that you rent this floor space with, fill the silence. You're in a tenement building in the heart of a bustling city, maybe London, maybe Paris, squeezed into a timber-framed house that leans precariously over the street below, like it's trying to gossip with the building opposite it. Your stomach gives a low, angry growl. It's early morning. The sun isn't even up yet, but hunger doesn't care about the sunrise. You want food. Specifically, you want something hot. You sit up, shivering slightly, as the draft cuts through the unglazed window shutter, and you look around the room for a hearth or a fireplace. You look for a stove. You look for even a simple pile of bricks where you could kindle a twig fire to warm up some pottage. But there is nothing. This is the first and perhaps most important realization of your life as a medieval urban dweller. You possess absolutely no way to cook your own dinner. We tend to imagine the past as a time of roaring hearths and cauldrons bubbling in every home, but that was a luxury reserved for the wealthy or the rural peasantry who had space for a central fire pit. Here, in the crowded city, you are poor, and space is money. Your apartment is barely 10 feet by 10 feet, constructed of dry timber, wattle, and daub. If you were to light a fire in here to toast a piece of bread, the sparks would catch the straw in your mattress, then the dry rush matting on the floor, and within minutes, the entire neighborhood would be an inferno. Medieval cities were essentially giant piles of kindling waiting for a spark, which is why the authorities are paranoid about you cooking at home. In fact, the city has strict ordinances preventing people like you from having ovens. Baking requires high, sustained heat and a lot of fuel, both of which are major hazards in a wooden skyscraper. Historians still argue whether these fire codes were strictly enforced by vigilant beetles or if everyone just hid their small braziers when the authorities walked by. But for the sake of your safety tonight, let's assume you are a law-abiding citizen. You have no kitchen, you have no pantry. If you buy raw flour or raw meat, it's useless to you unless you plan on eating it, like a feral animal. This creates a fascinating economic reality. In the modern world, eating out is often considered a luxury, something you do when you have extra cash or want to celebrate. Cooking at home is the frugal option. But for you, in the year 1300, the situation is completely flipped. Cooking at home is the status symbol. It implies you can afford a house big enough to have a chimney, a stock of expensive firewood, and servants to watch the flames so the house doesn't burn down. For the working poor, the laborers, the scribes, the weavers, you have to eat out. You are entirely dependent on the medieval equivalent of the fast food industry for your daily survival. So you sigh, rubbing the sleep from your eyes with a callous hand. You have to go out. You swing your legs off the straw mattress, and your bare feet hit the floorboards, which are cold enough to make you gasp. You fumble around in the dark for your tunic, pulling the scratchy wool over your head. It smells faintly of wood smoke and old sweat, the signature perfume of the era. You don't have a change of clothes, really. This is it. You slip on your shoes, simple leather turn shoes that have been patched so many times they are more patch than shoe, and you creep toward the door. You have to be quiet. The floorboards creak with a sound, like a dying crow, and you freeze, waiting to see if you woke the landlord who lives on the ground floor. Silence. You're safe. You unlatch the door and step out onto the landing. The staircase is narrow, steep, and pitch black. You navigate it by memory, keeping one hand on the rough plaster wall to steady yourself. As you descend, you think about the concept of the curfew. The word itself comes from the Old French couvre-feu, meaning cover fire. Every night, a bell rings, signaling that all fires must be dampened or covered with an iron lid to prevent accidents while people sleep. It's basically the medieval version of your mom yelling at you to turn off the video games and go to bed. Except if you disobey this rule, you don't get grounded, you get fined or put in the stocks. But the morning bell hasn't rung yet. The fires are still technically asleep. You push open the heavy front door of the building and step out into the street. The sensory assault is immediate. Even in the cool pre-dawn air, the city has a smell that is distinct. It's a complex bouquet of wet mud, rotting garbage, animal manure, and the faint, briny scent of the river. The street is narrow, a winding canyon of timber and plaster. Above you, the upper stories of the houses jut out so far that they almost touch in the middle, blocking out the stars. It's like walking through a tunnel. You step carefully. You know that people often empty their chamber pots out the window into the street, usually with a shouted warning of garde à l'eau, a corruption of garde à l'eau, or watch out for the water. But at this hour, you're mostly worried about stepping in what was thrown out last night. The ground is a slurry of mud and refuse. You trudge forward, the cold mud sucking at your shoes with every step. But then, cutting through the stench of the gutter, you smell it. It drifts on the breeze, warm and inviting, the smell of roasting meat, the sharp tang of onions caramelizing in fat, the yeasty, comforting aroma of hot bread. Your pace quickens. You aren't the only one awake. You see shadowy figures emerging from other doorways, all huddled in cloaks, all moving in the same direction. It's the morning migration of the kitchenless. You are all heading toward the cookshops. In London, this would be the Thameside district, a dedicated strip of 24-hour vendors and public ovens designed to feed the masses. It is the medieval food court, the buzzing, greasy heart of the city where the fires never really go out. You round a corner, and there it is. The glow of charcoal braziers illuminates the fog. You can hear the sizzling of fat dripping onto coals, a sound that speaks directly to your lizard brain. You check the pouch at your belt. You have a few pennies, small silver coins, clipped and worn thin. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to keep you alive for another day. You adjust your belt, take a deep breath of the savory air, and step into the light of the fires. You have arrived at the drive-thru, and the menu is waiting. You step fully into the glow of the cookshops, and the temperature instantly jumps 10 degrees. The air here is thick, almost chewable, heavy with the stinging scent of wood smoke and the rich, coating aroma of rendered animal fat. It's a physical sensation, a greasy film that seems to settle on your lips and eyelashes within seconds. You are standing in what effectively serves as the communal stomach of the city. If you are in London, this is likely the Vintry Ward, close to the River Thames, or perhaps the famous Cook's Row, described by chroniclers as a place where at any hour of the day or night, a hungry traveler can find a meal waiting. This is the medieval miracle of convenience. In a world where doing laundry takes 3 days and traveling to the next town over can take a week, the ability to walk up to a counter and be handed a hot piece of meat in 10 seconds is nothing short of technological sorcery. As you shuffle down the muddy lane, you are flanked on both sides by open-fronted stalls. These aren't restaurants in the modern sense. There are no tables with tablecloths, no polite waiters asking if you'd like tap or sparkling water. These are manufacturing plants for calories. The shops are essentially wooden shacks with their entire front walls removed, revealing the chaotic machinery of cooking inside. You see immense iron spits, some as long as a spear, turning slowly over beds of glowing charcoal. The noise is deafening. It's a wall of sound, the crackle of the fires, the hiss of dripping grease hitting the coals, the chopping of cleavers against wood, and the shouting. Always the shouting. The cooks and their assistants are the barkers of this carnival. They lean over their counters, faces flushed red from the heat, aprons stiff with layers of old blood and suet, yelling at you as you pass. Hot ribs, one bellows, waving a ladle at you. Fat geese, capons, beef ribs hot and steaming. They are aggressive because the competition is fierce. Every shop here sells roughly the same thing, so they have to win you over with volume and the visual appeal of their wares. And the visuals are intense. To display their stock, the cooks hang the cooked meats on hooks right out in the open air, suspended above the street. You look up and see a garland of protein. Roasted rabbits, haunches of venison, glistening sausages, and golden brown chickens, all dangling like festive ornaments. You stop to admire a particularly large goose spinning on a spit. It looks delicious, the skin bubbled and crisp. However, you also notice that the goose is exposed to the elements. There is no sneeze guard here. The dust from the street, kicked up by passing carts and horses, drifts casually onto the lunch menu. If it were summer, these hanging meats would be covered in a buzzing shroud of flies, but the cooks have a solution for that. They just baste the meat again, sealing the dust and the occasional insect under a fresh layer of hot fat. It's extra protein, really. This open-air buffet system is actually a point of pride for the city. It's famous. Travelers write home about it. There's a description from the 12th century by a man named William Fitzstephen who marveled at this very district. He called it a public kitchen, noting that even if a sudden influx of visitors arrived in the city, they wouldn't have to wait for food to be killed and cooked. They could just come here. It was the first true 24-hour diner. But as you stare at the meats, a thought crosses your mind. You are looking at the fast food of the 1300s, but you are also looking at a highly regulated industry. This is your mainstream historical fact for the night. Medieval authorities were obsessed with food standards. Not because they understood germ theory, they definitely didn't, but because they understood cheating. The city guilds and the mayor's office have strict price controls on how much a cook can charge for a roasted capon or a lark. They also have rules about reheating. A cook is technically forbidden from reheating meat that has been cooked once already and selling it as fresh. It's called recooking, and it's a major no-no. But as you look at that goose, you wonder, was that cooked an hour ago? Or was it cooked yesterday, left to cool in the corner, and then thrown back on the fire when you walked up? There is a certain dull sheen to the skin that makes you suspicious. Historians still argue whether these establishments were frequented by wealthy merchants looking for a quick, effortless bite, or if they were strictly the domain of the desperate poor who had no other option. Some evidence suggests that rich travelers would send their servants here to pick up takeout to bring back to their inns, treating it like a high-end catering service. Others argue that the cookshop was a low-class dive where only the destitute would risk their digestion. Looking at the guy next to you, a tanner with stained hands and a tunic that has seen better decades, you suspect it might be the latter. You continue walking, dodging a puddle that looks suspiciously deep. The ground here is paved with oyster shells and sheep knuckles, the debris of a million meals trodden into the mud. You pass a shop specializing in great flesh. That's beef, pork, and mutton. The smell is heavier here, gamey and intense. The cook is using a long fork to fish a piece of boiled beef out of a cauldron. Boiling was the standard way to cook tougher cuts of meat because it was fuel efficient. You can cook a lot of meat in one pot of water without needing a massive roaring fire. But you aren't in the mood for boiled beef. It reminds you too much of the pottage you eat every other day. You want flavor. You want spice. You want something that masks the taste of the meat itself, just in case the meat was, let's say, aged a bit too long before it hit the fire. You drift toward the end of the row where the pastry cooks set up shop. This is the elite tier of medieval junk food. Roasting a chicken is simple, but encasing chopped meat in a coffin of dough, that takes skill, and more importantly, it offers mystery. You watch a baker slapping dough onto a wooden table. He's working fast, his hands a blur of flour and water. He forms a thick, sturdy crust. This isn't the flaky, delicate puff pastry you know. This is a structural container, designed to be rock-hard and inedible, serving mostly as a baking dish for the contents inside. He scoops a ladle of minced meat. You can't quite tell what animal it came from, dumps it into the dough, and seals the lid. This is the medieval meat pie, the ultimate portable lunch. It's the ancestor of the Cornish pasty, the hot pocket, and the sausage roll. It beckons to you. It's cheap, it's hot, and it's self-contained. You don't need a bowl or a spoon. You just need a hand and a mouth. But as you reach for your coin pouch, you hesitate. You've heard stories about these pies. Rumors whisper through the alleys about what exactly goes into the mix when the city inspectors aren't looking. Is it beef? Is it venison? Or is it something that was barking at the moon 2 nights ago? The cook catches your eye and grins, revealing a mouth with very few teeth. He taps the crust of a fresh pie with a dirty fingernail. Hot, he says. Fresh, best in the city. You stand there, balancing your hunger against your survival instinct. The pie smells mostly of pepper and cloves, spices strong enough to hide a multitude of sins. The steam rising from the vent hole is hypnotic. You are about to make a decision that is the medieval equivalent of eating sushi from a gas station vending machine. You stare at the meat pie. It sits there on the wooden counter, a warm, golden brown monolith of uncertainty. The crust is thick and rigid, standing tall like a fortress wall guarding its secrets. This type of pastry is actually called a coffin or coffin in Middle English. While the word didn't necessarily mean a box for a dead body back then, it just meant a basket or box. The irony isn't lost on you. If you eat this, you might need a real coffin later. The cook is still grinning at you. He's wiping his hands on an apron that looks like a Jackson Pollock painting done in grease and gravy. Venison, he whispers conspiratorially, leaning over the counter, right from the king's forest. Don't tell the sheriff. Now, this is your first red flag. Venison is an aristocratic meat. Deer belong to the king or the high nobility. Poaching a deer is a crime, punishable by mutilation or death. The idea that this grimy street vendor has a steady supply of illicit royal deer meat selling for a few pennies is optimistic, but it's a common sales pitch. Everyone claims to be selling venison because it sounds fancy. You lean in and sniff the steam venting from the pie. It smells overwhelmingly of pepper. Pepper is expensive. It comes all the way from India, but cooks use it liberally for a reason. It's the great equalizer. It masks the taste of meat that has started to turn. It hides the off flavor of a cow that died of old age rather than the butcher's knife. We need to talk about the mystery meat phenomenon, because in the Middle Ages, it wasn't just a cafeteria joke. It was a legitimate public health crisis. The butchers and the pie bakers, the pastellers, had a notoriously shady symbiotic relationship. You see, butchers would often have leftover meat that was too unsold, too grisly, or too green to sell as a raw cut. They couldn't sell it to a housewife because she would smell it and slap them. So, what did they do? They sold it at a discount to the cookshops. The cookshop owner would take this questionable meat, chop it into an unrecognizable mince, mix it with onions, fat, and a heavy dose of spices, and bake it into a pie. Once it's inside the pastry, you can't see the green spots. You can't see the gristle. You can't see that it's actually a mix of beef, kidney, and rabbit lungs. It's the perfect crime. There's a famous historical record from London in the late 1300s about a man named John Penrose. He was a taverner who was caught selling wine that was unsound and unwholesome for man. His punishment? He had to drink a draught of his own bad wine, and then the rest was poured over his head. Now, imagine what they would do to a pie baker. In fact, we know what they did. Bakers caught selling putrid pies were often placed in the pillory, a wooden frame in the market square, with the rotting pies burned under their noses so they would be forced to inhale the stench of their own corruption. It was poetic justice, medieval style. But despite these risks, the scam persists. There are records of cooks claiming to sell beef pies that were actually filled with horse meat. Now, eating horse wasn't culturally acceptable in medieval England. It was taboo, something you only did in a famine. So discovering you'd been snacking on a retired plow horse was a major scandal. There's also the cat rumor. You've heard the street rhymes. Meow, meow, the children chant, when they run past a particularly dodgy pie shop. Is it true? Probably not on a massive scale. Cats are hard to catch and don't yield much meat. But the fear is real. The urban legend of the cat in the pie is as old as the pie itself. You look back at the pie in front of you. You ask the cook, "Is it really venison?" "Cross my heart," he says, making a vague gesture over his chest. You decide to pass. The risk-to-reward ratio is just too high. You back away from the pastry counter, leaving the venison for a braver or drunker soul. You want something safer, something where the anatomy of the food is still visible. You want to see the bone. You want to see the shape of the animal so you can confirm it isn't a cat. You continue down the row and you see something that fits the bill perfectly. It's a stall selling umbles. Umbles are the edible entrails of a deer or other animal, the liver, heart, kidneys, and lungs. This is where the phrase eating humble pie comes from, originally humble pie. It was food for the lower classes. The Lord ate the haunch, the servants ate the guts. But here on the street, you can buy them roasted on a skewer. You watch a vendor threading chunks of liver onto a sharp stick. This looks safer. You can identify a liver. It looks like a liver. He brushes it with a little vinegar and tosses it onto the grill. It sizzles aggressively. This is arguably the most nutritious thing you could eat right now. Pure iron and vitamins. Though you don't know that. You just know it's cheap. But then your eyes drift to the bucket next to his feet. It's full of other parts. Unidentifiable, wiggly, gray bits. You realize that while the liver on the stick looks fine, the hygiene of the prep station, a bucket in the mud, leaves something to be desired. Historians still argue about the exact composition of the street food diet for the urban poor. Some analysis of cesspits, ancient toilets, reveals a surprising amount of fish bones and cherry stones, suggesting a slightly healthier diet than the rotting meat stereotype. But other records show constant fines as levied against cooks for reheating stinking fish and selling rewarmed cockles. It really depended on your luck. You decide that meat, in general, is too much of a gamble this morning. You need something plant-based, something simple. You remember seeing a hawker near the bridge selling something steaming from a cauldron. You turn away from the heavy animal stench of the cook shops and head towards the lighter, earthier smell of boiling vegetables. As you walk, you pass a group of laborers sitting on a bench, devouring those very meat pies you just rejected. They seem fine. They are laughing, wiping grease from their chins, oblivious to the potential horse meat content. Maybe your stomach is just too sensitive. Or maybe they have built up an immunity, a stomach lined with iron, capable of digesting anything short of a rock. You reach the edge of the market where the cheaper, mobile vendors hang out. These aren't the established shop owners with their roasting spits. These are the people with a single pot and a loud voice. And there, shouting over the din, is a woman ladling something hot and green into wooden bowls. "Hot peas cods," she yells. "Hot sheep's feet." It's a combo meal, and for a penny, it might just be the best deal in London. You approach the woman with the cauldron. She is bundled in so many layers of wool that she looks less like a human being and more like a pile of laundry that has learned to stand upright. She is a street hawker, a huckster, one of the thousands of mobile vendors who fill the gaps between the established shops. She doesn't have a roof, a sign, or a guild membership. All she has is a portable iron pot, a ladle, and a set of lungs that could startle a cavalry horse. Hot peas cods, she bellows again, the steam billowing around her face like a special effect. Hot sheep's feet, 1 farthing, hot and savory. This is the bottom of the barrel, price-wise. If the cook shops with their roasting spits are the casual dining restaurants of the medieval world, this is the vending machine in the hallway. It is the absolute cheapest hot meal you can buy without technically stealing scraps from a dog. And right now, with the cold morning damp seeping into your bones, it looks absolutely gourmet. You step up to her makeshift station. It's just a trestle table set up in the mud, balancing a steaming cauldron over a small charcoal fire. You fish a farthing, a quarter of a penny, from your pouch. It's a tiny silver coin, so small you could inhale it by accident. You hand it over, and she gives you a nod that is both welcoming and suspicious. Peas or feet, she asks. Both, you say, feeling reckless. She reaches into the cauldron with a wooden ladle. First, she scoops out a generous helping of peas cods. Now, in the modern world, you might be picturing bright green, sweet garden peas, the kind you push around your plate at a wedding. These are not those peas. These are field peas, grayish green, starchy, and tough. In the summer, peas cods often refers to the whole pod boiled until soft, and you would pull the pod through your teeth to scrape out the peas and the fleshy inside, discarding the fibrous husk. It's a bit like eating edamame, but with less salt and more disappointment. However, since it is not harvest season, these are likely dried field peas that have been soaked overnight and boiled into a thick, lumpy mush. It's peas pottage, the fuel of the English peasantry. It lands in your wooden bowl with a heavy plop. It smells of wet earth and boiled vegetation. It is not an exciting smell, but it is a substantial one. Then comes the main course. She fishes around in the murky depth of the broth, chasing something with her ladle. After a moment of struggle, she triumphantly hauls up a sheep's trotter. It's a sheep's foot, just the foot. No leg, no thigh, just the ankle and the hoof, boiled until it is pale and wobbling. She drops it on top of the peas. "Mind the bones," she says, wiping the ladle on her sleeve. You stare at your breakfast. A sheep's trotter is a masterpiece of structural engineering, composed almost entirely of skin, tendons, cartilage, and tiny bones. There is very little meat in the traditional sense. Eating it is not so much chewing as it is disassembling. You find a spot to stand near the brazier, soaking up the heat, and you dig in. You pick up the trotter with your fingers. There are no forks here, and using a spoon on a foot would be ridiculous. The skin is hot and sticky. This is your main historical fact for this section. Sheep trotters were a wildly popular street snack because they were rich in gelatin and fat, two things the poor desperately needed. In a time before lip balm or moisturizer, eating a greasy, collagen-rich sheep's foot was practically a spa treatment for your face. You take a bite. It's chewy, very chewy. It tastes mostly of salt and boiled mutton fat. The texture is gelatinous, coating the roof of your mouth. It's a bit like eating a savory gummy bear that has bones in it. You have to gnaw around the knuckles, sucking the gelatin out of the crevices. It is a primal, messy experience. Your fingers are instantly coated in a layer of cooling lamb grease that acts like a natural glue. As you struggle to extract a tendon from the trotter, you look around at your fellow diners. You are surrounded by the morning rush, apprentices running errands, water carriers taking a break, and hungover students. Everyone is eating the same thing. This is the great equalizer. Whether you are a stonemason or a beggar, at 6 o'clock a.m. in the freezing cold, a hot sheep's foot is a blessing. There is a quirky historical tidbit here regarding the hot peascods cry. It became one of the most famous cries of London, a sonic trademark of the city. Centuries later, musicians would actually incorporate the melody of these street vendors into songs. You are listening to the top 40 hits of the 14th century, performed live by a woman with a ladle. But as you eat the peas, scooping the gray mash into your mouth with your fingers, or perhaps a piece of wood you found, you realize something. This food is incredibly filling. The peas are dense with starch, and the trotter is pure, slow-burning fuel. It sits in your stomach like a warm brick. It's not delicious, but it works. It stops the shivering. Historians still argue whether the popularity of these awful snacks was purely driven by economic desperation or if there was a genuine taste for them. We know the aristocracy ate the choice cuts, the venison haunches, and the roast swans, but we also see recipes in high-end cookbooks for humble pies and jellied feet. It suggests that even the rich occasionally enjoyed a bit of gelatinous texture, or maybe they just didn't want to waste any part of the animal. But out here on the street, there is no debate. You eat the foot because the foot costs a farthing and the leg costs a shilling. The messiness, however, is a real problem. You are now standing in the middle of a busy street with a clean-picked sheep bone in one hand and a bowl smeared with pea mush in the other. There are no trash cans. The concept of littering is somewhat fluid in the Middle Ages. You watch a man next to you finish his trotters and simply toss the bones over his shoulder into the mud. You hear a squelch as they disappear into the muck. You follow suit. The street itself is the compost bin. But what about your hands? They are slick with grease. You can't put them in your pockets because you don't really have pockets, just a pouch that you don't want to get greasy. You look for a napkin. There isn't one. This leads to the medieval napkin solution. You wipe your hands on your clothes. If you are fancy, maybe you wipe them on the underside of your tunic so the stains don't show. If you are like the guy next to you, you just wipe them on your chest and call it waterproofing. But there is another option: dogs. Every medieval city is patrolled by a legion of stray dogs. They are the organic street sweepers. A scruffy, wire-haired mutt has been watching you eat with intense, unblinking eyes. You hold out your grease-covered hand. The dog trots over and gratefully licks your fingers clean. It's a mutually beneficial transaction. You get clean hands. The dog gets a calorie boost. Is it hygienic? Absolutely not. Is it effective? Surprisingly, yes. You hand the wooden bowl back to the hawker. She doesn't wash it. She just dips it into a bucket of grayish water, gives it a swirl, and stacks it ready for the next customer. You try not to think about germs. You try not to think about the fact that the person before you might have had the plague, or worse, a really bad cold. You are full, but your palate is bored. The peas were bland, and the trotters were just salty glue. You crave something with texture, something crunchier than a boiled foot. And more importantly, you need something to soak up the remaining grease in your stomach. You need bread. But not just any bread. You've heard rumors about the bread in this part of town. You've heard that the white loaves aren't as white as they seem, and the brown loaves are heavier than they should be. You remember the warnings from the town crier about the baker's dozen and the severe punishments for those who cheat the scales. You leave the peascod lady and head toward the bakery stalls. You are about to enter the world of high-stakes gluten, where a loaf of bread can land a man in the pillory with a necklace of dough around his neck. You are about to discover that the medieval daily bread is anything but simple. You leave the steaming cauldron of the peascod lady behind, your stomach heavy with sheep cartilage and field peas, and drift toward the bakery stalls. If the cookshops are the greasy, chaotic heart of the market, the bakery district is its dusty, flour-coated soul. The smell here is different. It's sharper, drier. It smells of yeast and toasted grain, a scent that triggers a deep, ancestral comfort in your brain. Bread is life. In the medieval world, bread isn't just a side dish you ignore until the waiter brings the pasta. It is the main event. It is the plate, the spoon, and the meal itself. You approach a stall where loaves are stacked like firewood. The baker, a man with forearms the size of ham hocks and a face dusted white like a kabuki actor, watches you approach. He doesn't smile. Bakers are serious people. They are the most regulated professionals in the city, constantly operating under the terrified suspicion that they are about to be arrested. You scan the merchandise. The hierarchy of medieval society is perfectly preserved in these stacks of dough. On the top shelf, looking like holy relics, are the loaves of manche. These are small, round, and aggressively white. They are made from the finest wheat, sifted and resifted through linen cloths until only the purest starch remains. This is the bread of lords, bishops, and wealthy merchants. It's soft, airy, and represents everything you aspire to be. Below that is the cheat bread, whole wheat, coarser, darker, the middle class option. And at the bottom, sitting sadly on the rough wood, are the loaves of tourt or maslin. These are dark, dense bricks made from a mix of rye, barley, and whatever else was swept off the threshing floor. This is your bread. It's the bread that gives you a jaw workout and keeps your digestive system moving with the force of a freight train. But today, you are feeling fancy. You have a few coins left. You want the white bread. You point to a small, pale loaf on the middle shelf. The baker grabs it and places it on a set of brass scales. This brings us to your mainstream historical fact. The Assize of Bread and Ale. Enacted in England in the 13th century, this was one of the first consumer protection laws in history. It strictly tied the price and weight of a loaf of bread to the current price of a bushel of wheat. If the price of wheat went up, the loaf had to get smaller to keep the penny price the same. If wheat was cheap, the loaf got bigger. The authorities were obsessive about this. They knew that if the bakers started cheating the poor on the size of their daily loaf, riots would start before lunch. You watch the scales tip. It balances perfectly. But as you look at that white loaf, a little voice in your head whispers a warning. How did he get it that white? You see, white flour is expensive. It requires a lot of labor and waste to produce. But chalk is cheap. Alum, cheap. Ground up bones, free if you know where to look. There is a rampant underground industry of extenders. Unscrupulous bakers have been known to mix white clay or powdered chalk into the dough to make the bread look whiter and, more importantly, to make it heavier. Since bread is sold by weight, a baker who adds a pound of sand to his dough is selling you sand at the price of wheat. The outline promised you cobwebs, and yes, there are rumors of those too. though usually as an accidental ingredient from a dirty bakery ceiling rather than a deliberate additive. But sawdust? Absolutely. In times of famine or high grain prices, bakers would bulk out the flour with sawdust, acorn meal, or even dried moss. You might be buying a loaf that is 30% tree. You look closely at the crust. Is that a sparkle of quartz or just a stray bit of salt? You squeeze the loaf. It feels dense, suspiciously dense. A common trick is to underbake the bread, leaving the center raw and heavy with water. Water is heavy, and water is free. If a baker sells you a pound of bread that is actually 4 ounces of flour and 12 ounces of water, he's making a killing, and you are eating wet dough that sits in your stomach like a cannonball. Historians still argue about how widespread this adulteration really was. Some scholars believe that the severe punishments kept most bakers honest, while others point to the frequency of court records mentioning false bread to suggest that cheating was practically a sport. It's the eternal debate: were medieval people generally honest tradesmen, or was everyone running a hustle? If this baker gets caught, the consequences are public and humiliating. He won't just get a fine, he will be subjected to the hurdle. This involves tying the baker to a sledge or a hurdle, a rough wooden frame, tying the offending loaf of bad bread around his neck like a shameful necklace, and dragging him through the muddy streets of the city for everyone to jeer at. It's the Yelp review from hell. If he's a repeat offender, they might just banish him from the trade entirely or burn his oven down. The baker sees you hesitating. He grunts and tosses a 13th roll onto the pile. "Baker's dozen," he mutters. This is the origin of the phrase. Because the penalties for selling lightweight bread were so severe, bakers became terrified of accidentally selling a loaf that was even a fraction of an ounce under the legal limit. To cover their bases, they started throwing in an extra loaf, a vantage loaf, for every 12 purchased, just to be absolutely sure the total weight met the regulations. It wasn't generosity, it was fear. You take the deal, 13 joules of questionable white bread for the price of 12. You hand over your coin. You pick up a roll and inspect it. It's hard as a rock on the outside. You tap it against the wooden counter. Thunk, thunk. It sounds like wood. Good. That means it's stale, and stale bread is safer than fresh, wet bread. You tear a chunk off. The inside is grayish-white, not the brilliant snow white of modern Wonder Bread. You take a bite. It's gritty. Definitely some sand in there. Millstones grind the grain, but they also grind themselves down over time, depositing stone dust into the flour. So even honest bread is a little bit distinctively geological. You chew carefully, mindful of your teeth. Dental care is non-existent, and breaking a molar on a piece of granite in your morning toast is a life-altering event. But despite the grit, it tastes fine. It tastes like yeast and salt. It's a blank canvas. You have your filler, you have your carbs, but eating dry bread is a chore. You need to wash it down, or dip it in something, or perhaps gamble it away for something sweeter. As you chew, you hear a different kind of noise coming from further down the street. Not the clanging of pots or the shouting of butchers, but the sharp, rhythmic clatter of dice and the high-pitched laughter of people taking risks. You see a crowd gathering around a colorful, mobile stall. It looks festive. It looks dangerous. You tuck your bag of gritty rolls under your arm, safely away from the pickpockets who love distracted bread buyers, and head toward the noise. You are about to encounter the medieval equivalent of the carnival game, a place where sugar and gambling collide. The wafer sellers are waiting for you, and they don't just want to sell you a treat, they want to play a game for it. You follow the sound of rattling dice toward a cluster of people near the bridge. The mood here shifts. It's less about the grim necessity of survival calories and more about entertainment. You see a man standing behind a small, portable stove, but he isn't shouting about fish or trotters. He's holding a leather cup in one hand and shaking it rhythmically. Click, clack, click, clack. This is the wafer seller, the oubloyer. In the grand hierarchy of street food, he is the dessert cart, the ice cream truck, and the shady casino dealer all rolled into one. He's selling wafers, thin, crisp discs of batter cooked between two iron plates over a fire. They are the ancestors of the ice cream cone and the Belgian waffle. The crowd around him is young and rowdy. Students, apprentices, and a few soldiers with their helmets unstrapped. They aren't just lining up to buy a wafer. That would be boring. They are lining up to win one. You squeeze through the press of bodies to get a better look. The wafer seller has a flat wooden board set up on a barrel. He slams the leather cup down onto the wood and lifts it to reveal 3 bone dice. 6, he shouts. Who can beat 6? This is the hustle. You can simply buy a wafer for a penny, but where is the fun in that? The oubloyer offers you a chance to win one for a fraction of the cost, or perhaps win a dozen of them if you can beat his roll. It's a street-level gambling ring disguised as a bakery. The wafers themselves sit in a neat stack next to the stove. They are beautiful. Each one is about the size of a dinner plate, stamped with intricate patterns from the iron molds. Some have religious symbols, lambs, crosses, saints, while others have geometric designs or family crests. They are golden brown, fragile, and smell intensely of honey and vanilla. You watch a young boy, maybe 12 years old, step up. He slaps a farthing on the barrel. He grabs the cup, shakes it with his whole body, and slams it down. He lifts it. 3, 2, 1, a total of 6, a tie. The oubloyer grins, his teeth stained with wine. House wins on a tie, he crows, sweeping the coin into his pouch. The boy looks crushed, but the crowd laughs. It's a brutal lesson in probability theory, delivered via baked goods. This gambling aspect was a huge headache for medieval authorities. The church hated it. The city council hated it. The waferers had a reputation for being scoundrels, pimps, and spies. Because they wandered the streets at all hours, entering houses to deliver dessert for parties, they saw everything. And because their trade was tied to gambling, their stalls often became magnets for trouble. But the wafers, oh, the wafers. You decide to bypass the gambling. You've already risked your health on the sheep's foot. You don't need to risk your money on dice. You hold out a full penny. 1 wafer, no dice. The seller looks almost disappointed. He prefers the gamblers. The margins are better, but he takes your coin and hands you a wafer from the top of the stack. It's still warm. You take a bite. It shatters in your mouth. It's incredibly light, dissolving almost instantly on your tongue. It's sweet, but not cloying. The batter is made from fine white flour, sugar or honey, eggs, and wine. It's a sophisticated flavor, delicate and airy. It contrasts sharply with the heavy, gritty bread you just bought. This feels like luxury. It feels like something that shouldn't exist in a world of mud and plague. This is your mainstream historical fact. Wafers were originally religious. The word obli comes from the Latin obla, meaning offering. They started as the communion wafers used in church mass, unleavened, simple, holy. But somewhere along the line, people realized that if you added eggs, sugar, and spices to the holy recipe, it tasted a lot better. The church kept the plain version for the altar, and the street vendors took the tasty version to the market. It's a classic case of sacred becoming profane. As you munch on your wafer, you notice something odd about the pattern stamped into it. You expected a cross or a fleur-de-lis. Instead, the design pressed into the dough seems to be a rooster riding a fox, or maybe it's a satirical scene of a peasant beating a knight. The iron molds were often customized, and waferers used them to print political cartoons or bawdy jokes directly onto the food. You are literally eating a meme. Historians still argue about the exact role of these wafer sellers in the underground economy. In Paris, the oublieurs were so notorious for acting as go-betweens for illicit affairs and delivering love letters along with their cookies that going to buy wafers became a euphemism for other activities. The King of France eventually had to pass laws restricting their hours because the noise of their dice games was keeping honest citizens awake. A sudden shout breaks your concentration. A fight has broken out at the table. A soldier accuses the wafer seller of using loaded dice. The table is overturned. Wafers fly into the mud, shattering like stained glass. The crowd scatters instantly. In medieval London, you don't stick around to watch a fight unless you want to be arrested as an accomplice. You clutch your half-eaten wafer and duck down an alleyway. The fragile sweetness lingers on your tongue, a fleeting memory of refinement amidst the chaos. You have had your dessert. You have seen the vice. But now, as you walk away from the river and deeper into the city, you crave something salty again. The sugar was nice, but it doesn't have staying power. You find yourself thinking about the shape of the wafer, that religious circle turned into a snack. It reminds you of another shape, a knot, a crossed arm shape. You remember seeing monks handing out twisted breads to children near the cathedral. You turn a corner and see a stall selling exactly that, pretzels. But these aren't the crunchy, tiny snacks you get on an airplane. These are soft, doughy, and tied to a very specific legend. You are about to trace the holy origins of the ultimate salty snack. You leave the chaos of the gambling wafer sellers behind, the sound of the overturned table fading as you navigate the winding streets toward the cathedral district. The architecture changes here. The buildings are taller, stone replaces timber, and the smell of the river is replaced by the smell of incense and unwashed pilgrims. You are entering the zone of the church, and surprisingly, this is also a zone of innovation for snack food. You spot a vendor with a basket slung over his shoulder. He isn't shouting like the others. He has a certain pious dignity about him. In his basket, stacked in neat, interlocking rows, are twisted knots of dough. They are the size of your hand, golden brown, and speckled with large grains of coarse salt. These are pretiolas, or as you know them, pretzels. You stop him and buy one. It feels substantial in your hand, heavier than the wafer but lighter than the bread. You tear off a piece of the knot. The crust is chewy, resistant, yielding to a soft, white interior. The salt hits your tongue first, sharp and intense, triggering an immediate desire for a drink, which is a clever marketing strategy we will discuss later. This brings us to your mainstream historical fact. The pretzel is widely believed to have been invented by monks. The legend goes that in the early Middle Ages, around 610 AD, an Italian monk was looking for a way to reward children who had memorized their prayers. He took a scrap of leftover dough, rolled it into a long rope, and twisted it into a shape that mimicked a pair of arms crossed over the chest in prayer. He called it a pretiola, Latin for little reward. Now, historians still argue about the precise geography of this origin story. Was it Italy? Was it southern France? Was it Germany? The Germans certainly perfected it, calling it the briselle and making it a staple of their baking guilds. But regardless of the GPS coordinates, the symbolism is clear. You are eating a prayer. The three holes in the pretzel represent the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It is a theological diagram you can dip in mustard. But here on the street, the religious meaning has largely been eclipsed by the practical one. The pretzel is the ultimate portable food. Its shape isn't just symbolic, it's structural. The holes allow you to string a dozen of them onto a stick or a rope for easy transport. You see people walking by with necklaces of pretzels, snacking as they go. It's the medieval equivalent of a bag of chips, but with a built-in handle. You chew the salty nut and think about the Lent connection. In the Middle Ages, Lent is a serious business. For 40 days before Easter, you are forbidden from eating eggs, dairy, or meat. This rules out most pies, cakes, and even enriched breads. But the pretzel is vegan. It's just flour, water, and salt. It becomes the official snack of the penitent. It is the only junk food you can eat without endangering your immortal soul during the fasting season. However, the pretzel you are eating now, in the non-Lenten season, might be glazed with egg wash or even dipped in butter. The rules are flexible when the bishops aren't looking. There is a quirky historical tidbit involving pretzels and warfare. In 1510, the Ottoman Turks attempted to invade the city of Vienna by tunneling under the city walls at night. The only people awake at that ungodly hour were the bakers, who were busy preparing the morning pretzels. They heard the noise of the tunneling, raised the alarm, and saved the city. In gratitude, the king granted the pretzel bakers their own coat of arms. So, in a way, the snack in your hand is a military hero. As you finish the pretzel, licking the salt from your fingers, you feel a dryness in your throat. That salt is doing its job. It's making you thirsty. And in a city where the water can kill you, thirst is a dangerous thing. You look around for a fountain, but then you remember you don't drink water, not if you value your intestines. The water in the city conduits is often contaminated by the tanneries, the butchers, and the overflowing cesspits we mentioned earlier. If you drink straight from the public well, you are playing Russian roulette with dysentery. So, what do you drink? You need liquid. You need something safe. But before we get to the alehouse, you see a vendor near the riverbank selling something that combines food and liquid in the most disturbing way possible. He is ladling out bowls of stewed eels. Now, eels are a staple of the medieval diet. In fact, for a long time, eels were used as currency. Peasants would pay their rent in sticks of cured eels. But these eels, these aren't cured, these are fresh, and they came from right here. You walk to the edge of the riverbank. The water is brown, sluggish, and churning with the refuse of the city. And there, in the muck, You see the eel traps. These creatures are the bottom feeders of the bottom feeders. They eat the garbage that the city throws into the river. They are essentially filtration systems with fins. The vendor offers you a bowl of jellied eels. The eels are chopped into chunks and boiled in water with vinegar and spices. As the mixture cools, the natural collagen in the eels turns the broth into a clear, savory jelly. It's cold, slippery, and tastes intensely of the river. You stare at the wobbling bowl. The chunks of gray eel are suspended in the gelatin like specimens in a laboratory jar. This is a London classic. It will remain a classic for centuries, right up into the Victorian era and beyond. But staring at it now, knowing exactly what those eels have been eating for breakfast, you feel a wave of nausea. You decide that the pretzel was enough solid food for now. The salt is burning your throat. You need to wash it down. You turn away from the river, away from the jelly, and look for the sign of a bush. In the Middle Ages, a branch or a bush hung over a doorway is the universal sign for an alehouse. It means, we have brew ready. You spot a green branch dangling above a low door a few yards away. You can hear laughter and the clinking of mugs inside. You are about to enter the most important institution in medieval life, the alehouse, and you are about to learn why everyone, from children to grandmothers, starts their day with a drink. You turn away from the vendor holding the bowl of wobbling jellied eels, a sight that will haunt your nightmares for weeks, and head toward the green branch hanging over the doorway down the street. That branch, an ale stake, is the beacon of civilization. It signals that inside, fermentation has happened, and where there is fermentation, there is safety. You duck your head to enter the low door of the alehouse. The transition is jarring. Outside, the air was cold and smelled of river mud. Inside, it is warm, dim, and smells of malt, wood smoke, and damp wool. The room is crowded. It's not just men. There are women nursing babies, old folks playing board games, and laborers arguing about wages. This isn't a bar in the modern sense of a place you go to get drunk on Friday night. This is the community living room. And more importantly, it is the community water cooler. You find a spot on a bench and slap a coin on the sticky table. An alewife, the woman who runs the place, bustles over. She is the queen of this domain. In the medieval world, brewing is largely women's work. It's a domestic chore that's scaled up. She brews in the back, sells in the front, and throws out troublemakers with the efficiency of a bouncer. "A quart?" she asks. You nod. She dips a leather mug into a barrel and slams it down in front of you. The liquid is cloudy, thick, and brownish yellow. It looks a bit like soup. This is ale, not beer, ale. The difference is hops. In the 1300s, hops, which preserve beer and make it bitter, are still a controversial German innovation that hasn't fully taken over England yet. So this drink is unhopped. It is sweet, heavy, and flavored with groot, a mixture of herbs like bog myrtle, yarrow, and ground ivy. You take a sip. It's nutritious. That's the best word for it. It tastes like liquid bread. It's grainy. You have to chew it a little bit. This brings us to your mainstream historical fact. Everyone drank ale. Men, women, children, monks, nuns. The average medieval person consumed about a gallon of ale a day. But before you imagine a society of stumbling drunkards, you have to understand the alcohol content. This is small beer, or small ale. It's often the second or third running of the grain, meaning it has very low alcohol, maybe 1% or 2%. It's not designed to get you hammered, it's designed to hydrate you without killing you with cholera. The boiling process during brewing kills the bacteria in the water, making it infinitely safer than the well water you saw earlier. So, when you see a medieval painting of a breakfast table and there's a jug of ale, they aren't partying, they are just having their morning juice. It provides calories, vitamins, and hydration. It is the Gatorade of the Middle Ages. However, the alewife also sells strong ale, or double ale, for those who do want to party. That stuff is the first running of the mash, thick and potent. You look around the room and see a few people who have clearly opted for the upgrade. A man in the corner is singing a song that seems to have no melody and very few actual words. You stick to the small ale. You drink deeply, washing away the salt of the pretzel and the phantom taste of the sheep's foot. It settles your stomach. But as you look into your mug, you notice something floating in it. A husk? A bug? You fish it out with your finger. It's just grain. The filtering process is casual. Historians still argue about the social role of the alehouse. Was it a den of iniquity, as the church often claimed? Priests would thunder from the pulpit that alehouses were the devil's chapel, places of gambling, gossip, and gluttony. Or was it, as social historians argue, a vital economic hub where the poor could pool their resources for warmth and light? You look at the fire in the hearth. You look at the people sharing news. It feels like a survival mechanism. If you live in a cold, dark tenement, coming here to spend a penny on a drink that lets you sit by a fire for 3 hours is a bargain. You finish your drink and wipe your mouth. You feel better, warmer. The ale has done its job. But now, with your thirst quenched, your curiosity is piqued again. You've had the local staples, the peas, the bread, the ale. But you know that the city is a port. Ships arrive every day from exotic lands. What about the weird stuff? What about the food that doesn't belong here? You remember hearing about a trader in the market who deals in spices and Saracen foods. The medieval world is more connected than we often give it credit for. The Crusades were a disaster of violence, but they were a triumph of culinary exchange. Soldiers came back from the Holy Land with a taste for sugar, spices, and new cooking methods. You leave the warm embrace of the alehouse and step back into the street. The sun is fully up now, and the market is in full swing. You head toward the spice quarter, where the smells change from boiled cabbage to something sharper, sweeter, and more expensive. You are looking for a snack that traveled thousands of miles to get here. You are looking for the ancestor of the samosa. Wait, I need to correct my navigation. I just walked you out of the alehouse in search of foreign snacks, but looking at my map, the outline I promised to follow, I see I've skipped a step in the logic of our journey. We are still in the zone of the liquid breakfast. The alehouse wasn't just a pit stop, it was the foundation of your day. Before we run off to find exotic spices, we need to fully appreciate the alewife culture and the reality of this liquid calorie intake, because I barely scratched the surface of the why. So, rewind, you are still sitting on that bench. The alewife is staring at you because you've been nursing that empty mug for too long. Another? She asks, hands on her hips. Her apron is stained with yeast. You nod. You need the calories. This is the part of medieval life that is hardest for modern people to grasp. The sheer volume of liquid bread you have to consume to stay upright. You are likely a laborer or an apprentice. You burn 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day just existing in a world without elevators or thermostats. A bowl of peas won't cut it. You need the carbohydrates in that ale. As she pours your second pint, you watch the room. This establishment is actually someone's house. The alewife, let's call her Alice, brewed this batch in her kitchen copper yesterday. When it was ready, she put the ale stake, that bush outside, out the window to signal the neighbors. It's a pop-up bar. When the barrel runs dry, she pulls the bush inside, and the bar is closed until she brews again. This creates a rotating map of drinking spots across the city. You have to know who is brewing today. Alice is a powerful figure. In a society where women have few legal rights, ale brewing is one of the few independent economic avenues open to them. A successful alewife can support her entire family, but she is also a target. Literature of the time depicts alewives as cheats who dilute the beer or use short measures. There are church murals depicting demons carrying alewives off to hell for overcharging. It's a tough gig. You take a long draught. It's thick. It coats your throat. This liquid breakfast is essential because of the humoral theory of medicine. Medieval doctors believe your body is a balance of fluids. Digestion is seen as a cooking process in the stomach. If you eat cold, raw food, like lettuce or water, your stomach fire has to work too hard to warm it up, and you might get sick. But ale is already cooked, brewed, and it warms the blood. Therefore, drinking ale is medically responsible. You are practically taking your vitamins. But there is a downside. Because the water is unsafe, and milk is for cheese making and spoils instantly, and wine is for the rich, you are perpetually in a state of mild, buzzing dehydration. The salt in the food makes you thirsty. The ale quenches the thirst, but acts as a diuretic. It's a cycle. Suddenly, a bell rings outside. It's not the church bell, it's a crier. Fresh news, ships from the east. The alehouse chatters. Ships mean trade. Trade means new things. And for a foodie, it means the arrival of the strange, crispy triangles that have been appearing in the stalls of the foreign merchants. You finish your drink, wipe the foam from your lip, and stand up. The alcohol gives you a nice, warm buffer against the cold air as you step outside. Now we are ready for the detour. We are going to leave the muddy, cabbage-scented streets of London or Paris mentally and walk toward the docks where the influence of the Silk Road is landing. You walk past the spice merchants. The smell here is dizzying. Cloves, cinnamon, ginger, pepper, these things cost a fortune. A pound of nutmeg could buy a cow. But you aren't here for the raw spices. You are here for the snack that utilizes them. You find a stall run by a merchant who looks different from the locals. He is frying something in a deep pan of oil. The smell is incredible. Fried dough, cumin, and coriander. He hands you a small, triangular pastry. It is blistering hot from the oil. This is the sambusak. You hold the sambusak in your hand, and for a moment, you aren't in a damp northern European city anymore. You have been transported to the bustling souks of Baghdad or Damascus. The pastry is small, golden, and radiates heat. It's a perfect triangle, the edges crimped with a precision that makes the clumsy meat pies of the cookshops look like mud bricks. This is the great-grandfather of the samosa. And if you think globalization's famos is a modern invention, this little triangle proves you wrong. The sambusak, or sanbusaj in Arabic texts, has traveled thousands of miles to get to your hand. It originated in Persia, spread through the Islamic caliphates, traveled across North Africa, and jumped into Europe via Spain and the returning Crusaders. It is a true globetrotter. By the 13th and 14th centuries, recipes for these fried pastries were appearing in European cookbooks under names like sambukad or sanbusi. You take a bite. The crunch is audible. The dough is thin and crisp, shattering to reveal a filling that is a universe away from the boiled mutton you are used to. It's filled with minced meat, yes, but also with almonds, raisins, sugar, and a blend of spices that tickles your nose. It's sweet and savory at the same time, a flavor profile medieval people absolutely loved. We tend to separate dinner and dessert, but the medieval palate adored mixing meat with fruit and sugar. As you chew, you taste saffron. That metallic, floral flavor is the taste of pure wealth. Saffron is the most expensive spice in the world, then and now. The fact that it's in a street snack suggests that this merchant is catering to a slightly higher class of clientele, or perhaps he's just using turmeric to fake the color. Let's hope for the latter, for his profit margin's sake. The filling also contains cheese, a soft, fresh cheese that melts into the meat. In the Middle East, these were often filled with halloumi or feta, but here, it's probably a local curd cheese trying its best to imitate the original. This brings us to your mainstream historical fact. The Crusades were a culinary revolution. While the wars were brutal, the cultural exchange changed European diet forever. Soldiers returning from the Holy Land didn't want to go back to eating plain boiled turnips. They wanted the spices, the lemons, the sugar, and the fried pastries they had tasted in the East. This demand created the spice trade that would eventually drive the age of exploration. You are eating the catalyst for the discovery of the Americas. But there is a quirky side to this snack. In some medieval recipe books, the instructions for making sambukades include a step to blow up the pastry. This doesn't mean exploding it. It means that while the dough is raw, you insert a small reed or straw, blow air inside to puff it up like a balloon, and then seal it quickly before frying. It's a technique to make the pastry hollow and crispy. Imagine a medieval chef hyperventilating while trying to inflate 100 pastries before the oil gets too hot. It adds a literal element of breath to the food. You finish the triangle in 2 bites. It's oily, rich, and exotic. It makes the local food seem incredibly dull by comparison. You lick the grease from your fingers. It tastes of expensive spices. Historians still argue about how common these foreign foods were for the average person. Were sambukades strictly for the king's table, or did cheap knockoffs trickle down to the street markets? Given that we find versions of meat pockets in almost every culture, it's likely that once the idea of frying a spicy meat triangle landed, it was copied by street vendors everywhere, using cheaper ingredients to mimic the royal version. The merchant watches you enjoy it. He smiles. He knows he has the best product in the market, but he also knows it's a niche item. Most people here are suspicious of strong flavors. They think too much spice causes heating of the blood, which leads to anger and sin. You, however, feel fine. You feel cultured. But the sweetness of the raisins in the sambusak has triggered a craving. You've had the savory sweet mix, But now you want pure sugar. You want something festive. You remember that today is a feast day, and feast days mean fairs, and fairs mean one thing above all else: gingerbread. Not the soft cake you might be thinking of, and not the hard cookie houses. Medieval gingerbread is a different beast entirely. It is a status symbol you can eat. It is often covered in gold. Yes, actual gold. You leave the exotic fry cook and head toward the town square, where the tents of the fair are set up. You are about to enter the world of fairings, where food is designed to be looked at as much as it is to be eaten. You leave the quiet intrigue of the spice merchant's stall and turn toward the town square. The noise hits you first, a chaotic wall of sound that makes the cookshop row seem like a library. There are drums beating, flutes piping, and a man shouting that he has a pig that can count to 10. You have stumbled into a fair. Fairs are the high points of the medieval calendar. They are sanctioned by the king or the local bishop, usually tied to a saint's feast day. For a few days, the normal rules of commerce are suspended. Foreign merchants can sell without paying local guild taxes, which means the variety of goods is explosive. It's a temporary autonomous zone of commerce and partying. You push through the crowd, dodging a juggler who is dangerously inept with 3 wooden clubs, and you head for the food tents. You are looking for a fairing. A fairing is exactly what it sounds like: a small gift or souvenir bought at a fair. If you have a sweetheart, you are legally required, by the laws of romance, not the king, to buy them a fairing. Ribbons are popular, as are small pewter brooches, but the undisputed king of fairings is gingerbread. You spot the stall easily because it is glittering, literally. The sun catches the table and throws sparkles of light into your eyes. You step closer and see rows of dark, reddish-brown cakes, stiff and flat, standing up like decorative tiles. And on many of them, there is a flash of gold. This is medieval gingerbread, but it is nothing like the soft, cake-like squares or the crisp snap cookies you know. This is pain d'épices in its ancestral form. It is dense, it is heavy, and curiously, it often contains no flour at all. The recipe is a masterpiece of recycling. The baker takes stale bread, masses of it, grates it into fine crumbs, and mixes it with honey that has been boiled with spices until it is a thick, dark glue. He stirs the crumbs into the hot honey until it forms a stiff paste, then presses this paste into intricate wooden box molds. When it dries, it becomes rock hard. It is essentially a spiced, honey-preserved brick of old bread. But it's the decoration that counts. You pick up a piece shaped like a heart. The details are incredible. You can see tiny flowers, a motto written in Latin, and a border of leaves, all raised in relief from the mold. And right in the center, brushed onto the highest points of the design, is a layer of gold leaf. Gilt gingerbread. This is where the phrase, "to take the gilt off the gingerbread," comes from, meaning to strip away the fancy outer layer to reveal the plain reality underneath. But right now, the gilt is very much on. This brings us to your mainstream historical fact. In the Middle Ages, presentation was often more important than taste. Food was theater. Serving a dish covered in gold or silver was the ultimate flex. It signaled that you were so wealthy you could literally eat money. For the super rich, this meant covering entire roast peacocks in gold leaf. For you, the street snacker, it means buying a gingerbread saint with a golden halo for a pennies. But is it real gold? You squint at the shiny flake. This is a point of scholarly debate. Historians know that party gold, or Dutch gold, an alloy of copper and zinc, was often used for cheap decorations. However, eating copper isn't great for you. Others argue that honest bakers used saffron and egg yolk to paint a gold glaze on the cookies, or perhaps very thin, low-quality gold leaf that was barely worth the cost. There is also the horrifying possibility that it is lead foil painted yellow. In the unregulated chaos of a medieval fair, you pay your money and you take your chances with heavy metal poisoning. You buy a piece shaped like a knight on horseback. It feels indestructible in your hand. You could probably use it to shim a wobbly table. You take a bite. It requires commitment. You have to gnaw at the corner. Once you break through, the flavor is intense. It is overwhelmingly sweet from the honey, but then the pepper kicks in. Medieval gingerbread is spicy. We aren't talking about a hint of cinnamon. We are talking about black pepper, grains of paradise, long pepper, and ginger, lots of ginger. This heat is intentional. In the medieval medical worldview, spices were hot and dry. They were considered pharmaceutical. Ginger, in particular, was prized for settling the stomach and warming the blood. So, this isn't just a cookie, it's a digestive aid. You are eating Tums that taste like Christmas. The hardness of the gingerbread also serves a practical purpose. It is the ultimate pocket food. You can buy a piece on Tuesday, keep it in your pouch, sit on it a few times, and eat it on Friday. It won't spoil. The honey acts as a natural preservative, and the lack of moisture means mold has a hard time taking hold. It is the energy bar of the 14th century. You stand there, gnawing on your golden night, watching the fair swirl around you. You see children running with identical gingerbread figures, already licking the gold off. You see a young man shyly handing a heart-shaped piece to a girl who blushes. It's a scene that has played out for centuries. But there is a weirder side to these molds. If you look at the back of the stall, away from the pious saints and romantic hearts, you might see the adult gingerbread. Medieval humor was earthy, to put it mildly. Archaeologists have found badges and molds depicting flying phalluses, vulvas dressed as pilgrims, and other body scenes. It is highly likely that alongside the Virgin Mary cookies, there are gingerbread anatomical parts being sold to giggling apprentices. It's the bachelorette party merchandise of the 1300s. As you finish your night, the head is the last to go. You feel a lingering burn in the back of your throat from the pepper. It's pleasant. The honey sits heavy in your stomach. You have had your sugar fix. You have had your visual spectacle. But as the sun begins to dip lower, casting long shadows across the fairground, the temperature drops. The warming spices of the gingerbread are fading. You start to crave something that is physically hot. You want grease again. You want that feeling of hot fat coating your tongue. You smell it before you see it. The scent of boiling lard. It cuts through the sweet perfume of the gingerbread stall like a knife. It's a heavy, savory, clinging smell. You follow your nose away from the dry goods and towards a vendor who is working over a roaring fire. He isn't baking hard bricks. He is creating something fleeting, something that must be eaten the second it is made. He is making fritters. You follow the scent of boiling lard away from the gingerbread stall. It is a heavy, thick aroma that hangs in the air like a fog, distinct from the wood smoke and the animal stench of the rest of the city. It calls to a very specific part of your brain, the part that craves high-density energy, the part that knows winter is coming and wants to pack on a layer of insulation. You arrive at a small, precarious setup near the edge of the market square. This isn't a shop, it's a hazard. A man is standing over a large, three-legged iron cauldron that sits directly on a bed of white-hot charcoal. The cauldron is filled 3/4 of the way with bubbling, spitting, grayish liquid. This is the fritter seller. In the medieval culinary landscape, he is the alchemist of Greece. He takes boring things, apples, sage leaves, chunks of parsnip, or simple balls of dough, and transmutes them into golden treasures by dipping them into the hot bath. You watch him work. He moves with a terrifying speed. In one hand, he holds a bowl of batter, a pale, sloppy mixture of flour, eggs, and ale. In the other, he has a perforated spoon. He scoops up a blob of the batter, maybe containing a slice of apple or a wad of chopped herbs, and drops it into the cauldron. Hiss! The sound is aggressive. The batter hits the hot fat and instantly seizes, puffing up as the water inside turns to steam and tries to escape. It bobs to the surface, turning a deep, rich brown. The vendor flips it with a casual flick of his wrist. He isn't wearing safety goggles. He isn't wearing heat-resistant gloves. His arms are a map of small, shiny burn scars, the inevitable tattoos of his trade. He fishes out a finished fritter, shakes off the excess grease and tosses it onto a wooden platter where a small mountain of them is already steaming. "Crispels," he shouts. "Hot crispels, fritters of herbs, fritters of fruit." You step up and buy one. It costs a pittance. You get a herbalade fritter, a simple dough mixed with parsley, sage, and maybe a bit of hyssop. It is piping hot. You have to juggle it from hand to hand to keep from burning your fingers. You take a bite. The outside is shatteringly crisp. It crunches loudly in your ear. Then, your teeth sink into the soft, steaming, sponge-like interior. It tastes of fried dough, which is a universal language of comfort, but also of the savory, earthy herbs. And then comes the aftertaste, the fat. This brings us to your mainstream historical fact. In Northern Europe, the primary cooking fat was lard, rendered pork fat, or butter. Olive oil was a luxury, imported from the South, and was mostly used during Lent when animal fats were forbidden. So, unless it is a fast day, you are eating a donut fried in pig fat. This gives the fritter a heavy, meaty undertone that makes it incredibly satisfying. It's savory, even if the filling is sweet fruit. The batter itself is a marvel of medieval chemistry. Recipes from the time often call for using ale or wine in the batter. The yeast in the ale helps the dough rise and puff up when it hits the oil, acting as a raising agent long before baking powder was invented. Some high-end recipes even suggest using snow, yes, actual snow, whisked into egg whites to create a foam that makes the fritters light and airy. It's an early form of molecular gastronomy. But as you eat, you notice the oil in the cauldron is dark, very dark. This leads to a significant scholarly debate. How often was street food frying fat changed? We know that oil and fat were expensive commodities. You didn't just throw them away after one use. Historians argue about the rancidity threshold of the medieval palate. Did people just get used to the taste of slightly oxidized burned fat? Or did vendors have tricks to clean it? There are manuals that suggest clarifying used fat by boiling it with water and bread crusts to absorb the off flavors. But looking at this vendor's cauldron, which looks like it contains a liquid shadow, you suspect he hasn't done a clarifying run in a while. The fritter sits heavy in your stomach, joining the gingerbread, the ale, and the sheep's foot in a digestive cocktail that would hospitalize a modern nutritionist. But you feel great. You feel warm. The fat is fuel. You watch the vendor drop a handful of flowers into the batter. Elderflowers. He dips the entire flower head, stem and all, into the batter and fries it. The result is a beautiful, lacy pancake that tastes of perfume and spring. This is the whimsical side of medieval food. They fried everything. Borage leaves, comfrey, apple slices, figs. If it could be dipped in batter, it went into the cauldron. There is a quirky historical tidbit about the name. The word fritter comes from the Latin frictura, meaning a fry. But in England, they were often called crisples or crisps. So when you hear about medieval crisps, don't picture a potato chip. Picture a deep-fried, herb-filled donut hole. And interestingly, recipes for these often appear in medical texts as well as cookbooks, sometimes as a delivery system for bitter medicinal herbs. You are eating your medicine. But standing this close to the cauldron is unnerving. You are witnessing a controlled grease fire. In the crowded wooden city, this stall is a bomb waiting to go off. If the cauldron tips, or if the fat boils over into the fire, the splash could ignite a blaze that consumes the entire block. Fritter sellers and cooks were frequently cited in court records for accidentally setting fire to their neighbors' houses. It adds a thrill of danger to the transaction. You are buying a snack from a pyromaniac. You finish the last bite of your herb fritter, wiping the grease on your tunic, which is now thoroughly waterproofed. The sun has completely set while you were eating. The sky is a deep, bruised purple. The air is getting colder, biting at your nose and ears. The heat from the fritter is fading from your body, replaced by the chill of the night. The market is winding down. The gingerbread seller is packing away his golden nights. The alewife has taken in her bush. The city is changing gears. The noise of commerce is dying down, replaced by the sounds of the night watch and the scurrying of rats. You are full. You have eaten your way across the social spectrum, from the gutter-scavenged eels to the gold-plated gingerbread, but you aren't ready to go back to your cold, dark room yet. The night is long, and you need one last thing. Not food, not drink. You need heat, physical heat. You see a glow in the distance. It's not a cook shop. It's smaller, lower to the ground. It's a charcoal brazier, and a crowd is huddled around it, not really moving, just standing. You realize they are buying something that fits in the palm of your hand, something that serves as both a snack and a hand warmer. You head toward the chestnut cellar. It is the final comfort before the curfew bell rings. The darkness of a medieval city is not like the darkness you know. It isn't the purple-gray haze of light pollution that hovers over modern towns. It is a thick, velvety, suffocating blackness. As you leave the area of the fritter cellar, the light from his fire fades, and you are plunged into a gloom so deep you can barely see your own feet. The only illumination comes from the occasional window shutter, leaking a sliver of candlelight, or the distant torch of a passing night watchman. And with the darkness comes the cold. It's a damp, pervasive chill that ignores your wool tunic and goes straight for your marrow. You have to remember, We are sitting on the precipice of what climatologists call the Little Ice Age. Winters are getting longer and harsher. The Thames might freeze solid this year. The cold isn't just uncomfortable, it's a predator. You hurry towards that glowing red eye. In the distance you spotted earlier. As you get closer, you see it's a perforated iron drum filled with glowing charcoal, a brazier. Around it, a small group of people are standing in a tight circle, silence hanging over them. They aren't talking, they are worshiping the heat. This is the chestnut seller's station. You squeeze into the circle. The heat hits your face like a physical blow, a wonderful stinging warmth that makes your frozen nose run. The smell here is distinct. It's the scent of carbon, ash, and the sweet, roasted aroma of Castanea sativa, the sweet chestnut. The vendor is an old man who looks like he has been smoked like a ham. His skin is gray with ash, his eyes red from the fumes. He uses a pair of long, blackened tongs to shuffle the nuts on a metal grate that sits atop the coals. He doesn't need to shout his wares. On a night like this, the heat is his advertisement. You hand him a halfpenny. In exchange, he doesn't give you a bag. Paper is too expensive for wrapping trash. Instead, he grabs a scrap of old cloth or perhaps a cone made of a large dried leaf and fills it with a dozen roasting hot nuts. You take them, and immediately you understand the dual purpose of this snack. You don't eat them yet. You clutch the bundle in both hands. You press it against your chest. You slide it into your sleeves. These are pocket warmers. For the first 10 minutes of the transaction, the chestnuts are essentially organic, edible heat packs. They radiate a dry, intense warmth that thaws your stiff fingers. It is the cheapest central heating you will ever buy. This brings us to your mainstream historical fact. For vast swaths of Europe, especially in the mountainous regions of Italy and France, the chestnut was not a snack. It was survival. They called the chestnut tree the bread tree. Before the potato arrived from the Americas, chestnuts were the primary source of carbohydrates for the poor in these regions. They were dried and ground into flour to make polenta, or heavy, dense bread. In the city, however, they are a winter treat, a reminder of the harvest that is keeping the famine at bay. You watch the vendor carefully scoring the raw nuts with a small knife before tossing them onto the fire. Slit, slit, slit. He does this with a rhythmic precision. This is the bomb disposal aspect of chestnut roasting. A chestnut is basically a sealed pressure vessel containing water. If you put it on a fire without piercing the skin, the water turns to steam, the pressure builds, and bang! The nut explodes with the force of a firecracker, sending scalding hot shrapnel of nut meat and shell flying into the faces of the customers. In a crowded medieval street, an exploding chestnut is a genuine hazard. There are accounts of people being blinded by hot shell fragments. So, the vendor's knife work is a matter of public safety. Historians still argue about the social standing of the chestnut. Some texts from the era dismiss them as pig food, noting that in the countryside, pigs were driven into the forests to fatten up on fallen nuts. Therefore, eating them was seen by the upper crust as debasing, something only a peasant would do. Yet, we simultaneously see recipes in royal cookbooks for chestnut puree served with venison. It seems the chestnut existed in a superposition of status, garbage food for the poor, garnish for the rich. But out here in the cold, nobody cares about social hierarchy. They just care about the calories. You finally decide it's time to eat one. You pick a nut from your bundle. It's hot enough to burn your fingertips, so you have to juggle it, blowing on it frantically. You crack the charred paw's outer shell. It gives way with a satisfying crunch, revealing the inner skin, which is fuzzy and bitter. You have to peel that off too, which is fiddly work in the dark. Finally, you get to the kernel. It's yellow, soft, and mealy. You pop it into your mouth. It's sweet, crumbling on your tongue. It tastes of smoke and earth. It's dry though, very dry. This is a characteristic of medieval street food. It's often dense and thirst-inducing. As you chew, you look at the faces around the brazier. The firelight casts deep shadows, making everyone look like an oil painting by Georges de la Tour. There is a soldier, a washerwoman, a beggar, and you. For a moment, the strict class barriers of the day melt away. You are all just cold mammals, huddling around a fire, sharing a primitive meal. But there is a darker side to the chestnut. According to the humoral theory of medicine that dominates your world, chestnuts are problematic. They are considered cold and dry, or sometimes warm and dry, depending on the doctor, but universally, they are accused of being windy. Medieval doctors warned that chestnuts generate wind and cause griping of the guts. In modern terms, they give you terrible gas and a stomachache if you eat too many. And you have just eaten a dozen of them on top of deep-fried dough, spiced gingerbread, ale, trotters, and questionable meat pies. You finish the last nut, tossing the shell into the brazier where it flares up for a second, adding its tiny ghost to the fire. Your hands are warm now, but your stomach is starting to make a sound like a distant thunderstorm. The combination of grease, sugar, spices, unrefined flour, and windy nuts is beginning to ferment in your gut. You are experiencing the authentic aftermath of a medieval binge. You realize that while you have survived the hunger of the day, you now have to survive the digestion of the night. Suddenly, a deep, resonant sound booms across the rooftops. Bong. It's the great bell of the cathedral, or maybe the town hall bell. Bong. It is the curfew bell, the cover fire bell. This is the signal. The city is officially closing. The gates are being locked. The alehouses are supposed to shut their doors. The watchmen are starting their patrols to arrest anyone found wandering without a light or a valid reason. The chestnut seller sighs, picks up a bucket of water, and douses his brazier. Hiss. A cloud of steam swallows the little circle of warmth. The light dies. You are left in the dark again. You need to get home. But more urgently, you feel a sharp cramp in your abdomen. The wind the doctors warned you about has arrived. You are about to learn how medieval people dealt with the inevitable consequences of their dietary choices. You are about to explore the world of medieval indigestion cures and the desperate struggle for a good night's sleep. The curfew bell is still echoing in the damp night air, a low, vibrating hum that you can feel in your teeth. You are walking fast now, head down, shoulders hunched against the biting wind. The city is shutting its eyes. Shutters are slamming closed, bolts are sliding into place, and the only light comes from the faint, dying embers of street fires and the moon struggling through the smog of wood smoke. But your haste isn't just about the curfew laws, it's about your internal geography. Specifically, it's about the civil war that has just broken out in your lower intestine. You see, you have just spent the last 2 hours consuming a digestive nightmare. You have layered boiled field peas, cold and dry, with sheep fat, hot and moist, followed by yeasty ale, cold and moist, followed by a massive infusion of sugar and pepper, hot and dry, followed by deep-fried lard dough, hot and moist, and topped off with chestnuts, very windy. In the modern world, we would call this heartburn or indigestion and reach for a bottle of pink liquid. But you don't have antacids. You have a worldview. You are currently experiencing a crisis of humoral theory. This brings us to your mainstream historical fact. Medieval medicine was entirely based on the ancient Greek concept that the body is a container for four fluids, or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health is defined as a perfect balance of these fluids. Digestion is viewed not as a chemical breakdown, but as a literal cooking process. Your stomach is a cauldron. Your natural heat is the fire under the pot. Right now, your pot is boiling over. You stop in a darkened doorway, clutching your stomach as a wave of cramping hits you. According to the medical wisdom of your time, you have committed the sin of surfeit. You have overwhelmed your internal cook. The heavy, cold chestnuts and the sticky, phlegmatic trotters are putting out the fire in your belly, while the sharp spices of the gingerbread are trying to reignite it, causing turbulent vapors, wind, to rise up and assault your heart and brain. This isn't just uncomfortable. In the medieval mind, it is dangerous. Bad digestion is the root of almost all illness. If the food rots in your stomach instead of cooking, it produces corrupt humors that will seep into your veins and give you a fever, or worse, the plague. You need to intervene, and you need to do it now. You fumble in your pouch. You are looking for the medieval equivalent of a Tums. You pull out a small, hard, white object about the size of a pebble. It is a comfit, or a draggie. Earlier, perhaps while you were at the spice merchant's stall, you bought a pennyworth of these. They look like candy. Specifically, they look exactly like modern Good and Plenty or Jordan almonds. And that's because they are the direct ancestors of those candies. But for you, this isn't a sweet treat. It is a pharmaceutical device. You pop the comfit into your mouth. The outer shell is hard sugar, which dissolves to reveal the core, a single seed of anise, fennel, or coriander. You crunch down on the seed. The sharp, licorice-like flavor explodes in your mouth. You breathe in deeply. The relief is almost instant. Here is the logic. Anise and fennel are carminatives. That means they expel wind. They are also considered drying and warming. By eating them at the end of a meal, you are technically closing the stomach. Medieval doctors believed that the stomach had a literal mouth that needed to be sealed shut after eating so the heat wouldn't escape. The sugar and spices act as the seal. This is why, to this day, Indian restaurants offer you candy-coated fennel seeds at the door, and French restaurants offer digestives. You are participating in a 2,000-year-old medical ritual. But what if the anise seed isn't enough? What if the feeling of heaviness, the nausea, doesn't pass? Well, you have a second option. It is a bit more drastic, but highly recommended by the best doctors in Europe. You could just throw it all up. This is your quirky/fringe tidbit for the night. In the Middle Ages, vomiting was not seen as a sign of illness, but as a healthy maintenance activity. Medical texts, such as the Regimen Sanitatis Salernitanum, the most popular health guide of the era, actually recommended a therapeutic vomit once a month to clear out the system. It was like changing the oil in your car. You lean against the rough timber wall of a warehouse, considering this. You could stick 2 fingers down your throat, the mechanical method, or you could have bought an emetic herb from the apothecary. If you were wealthy, you might even have a special basin for this purpose. The logic is sound to you. If the pot is overfilled, dump it out. However, you decide against it. You want to keep the calories. You paid good money for that fat and sugar, and you are skinny enough as it is. You will ride out the storm with the help of the fennel seeds. As you resume your walk, sucking on the soothing sugar, you think about the vast industry that supports your stomach. The apothecaries in the city are filled with electuaries, medicinal jams made of sugar and spices designed solely to help rich people poop. There are purgatives made of rhubarb and scammony that would strip the lining off a pipe. Historians still argue about the extent to which the common people actually subscribed to this high-concept humoral theory. Did a peasant eating turnips really worry about his black bile levels? Or was this strictly the neurosis of the educated elite? Some evidence suggests that while the Latin terminology was for the rich, the basic concepts, don't drink water with melon, eat cheese to stop the bowels, were folk wisdom deeply embedded in the culture. You, as a city dweller, definitely know the rules, even if you break them constantly. The sugar from the comfit is settling your stomach, or at least distracting you from the pain. The wind is subsiding, or perhaps just finding its natural exit. We won't dwell on that, but let's just say the medieval street smelled the way it did for a multitude of reasons. You turn the final corner. You are on your street. It is narrow, dark, and silent. The overhanging stories block out the moon completely. You have to feel your way along the walls to find your door. You are exhausted. The sugar rush from the fair is crashing. The warmth from the ale is fading, replaced by the bone-deep chill of the night. Your feet are wet from the mud. Your tunic smells of stale smoke and old grease. You are a walking sensory map of the city's food scene. You reach your building. The door is heavy oak, studded with iron nails. It's unlocked. The landlord leaves it open until the very last minute. You push it open and step into the pitch-black hallway. The smell of the building hits you, damp straw, unwashed bodies, and the faint, sour scent of old pottage. It is the smell of home. You creep up the stairs, trying to avoid the squeaky board on the third step. You don't want to wake the house. You have survived the day. You have navigated the financial traps of the bakers, the health hazards of the cookshops, and the biological roulette of the water supply. You have successfully fueled your body for another 24 hours of labor. You reach your room. You open the door quietly. The air inside is stale and cold, but it's yours. You can hear the breathing of the others in the dark. You have one final task before you can sleep. You have to secure the remains of your day. You have a leftover piece of gingerbread and half a hard roll in your pouch. You can't just leave them on the floor. The rats will get them. You navigate to the corner of the room where a wooden chest sits. You open it and place your food inside, locking it tight. In this world, food is the only currency that matters, and you guard it like gold. You move to your mattress. You don't undress. It's too cold for that. You just kick off your shoes. You lie down on the straw, pulling your thin woolen blanket up to your chin. Your stomach gives one last, protesting gurgle, then settles into a low, rhythmic churn. The internal cook is finally getting to work. You are lying in the straw, the scratchy wool blanket pulled up to your chin, but you are not asleep yet. The room is dark, but it isn't silent. In the cramped intimacy of a medieval tenement, private time is a concept that simply does not exist. You can hear the rustling of straw as your roommates settle in. You can hear the low murmur of voices. And then you hear a sound that is universally recognized across all centuries and cultures. The pop of a cork, or in this case, the squeak of a wooden bung being pulled from a clay jug. Someone has brought home a nightcap. A candle is struck, a rushlight actually, just a piece of dried pith dipped in mutton fat, burning with a smoky, sputtering flame. It casts long, dancing shadows against the wattle and daub walls. A face leans into the light. It's the weaver who sleeps in the corner. He holds up a jug and a few scraps of hard cheese. "Last call," he whispers. This is the true tavern of the city. While the public houses are legally required to shut their doors at the curfew bell, the drinking doesn't stop. It just moves indoors. You sit up, wrapping the blanket around your shoulders like a cape. The cold is intense now, a physical presence in the room, but the camaraderie is warmer. You join the small circle forming on the floorboards. The weaver passes the jug. You take a sip. It's not the thin, watery, small beer you had for breakfast. This is the good stuff, strong ale, thick and sweet. It warms your chest instantly. This brings us to your final mainstream historical fact for the night: the origin of the word toast. As the jug goes around, the weaver pulls out a piece of blackened, stale bread from his pouch. He drops it directly into the jug of ale. You watch it bob there, soaking up the liquid like a sponge. In the Middle Ages, wine and ale were often harsh, acidic, or filled with sediment. Putting a piece of spiced, toasted bread into the vessel helped to filter the dregs and, more importantly, absorb some of the acidity, making the drink smoother. The bread itself, the toast, would become a booze-soaked treat at the bottom, a prize for whoever finished the jug. Over time, the person being honored with the drink became known as the toast, but tonight, it's just a literal piece of burnt carb floating in your beer. You watch the toast disintegrate slowly. It's a moment of quiet luxury. You are sharing the scraps. This is a fundamental part of medieval food culture. Nothing is wasted. The cheese is hard rind, the bread is stale, and the ale is the bottom of the barrel. But shared here in the semi-darkness, it feels like a feast. Historians still argue about the nutritional quality of this peasant diet. For a long time, Victorian historians looked back on the Middle Ages as a time of constant starvation and gruel. But modern analysis suggests that while food insecurity was real, the urban diet was surprisingly varied. You've had protein, dairy, grains, sugars, spices, and fats today. It wasn't hygienic, and it certainly wasn't clean eating, but it was calorically dense. You aren't starving, you are just processing a lot of biological chaos. As you pass the jug to the next person, a young apprentice who looks half asleep already, you listen to the sounds of the city outside. The roar of the day has vanished. The hawkers are gone. The carts are stabled. In their place, you hear the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the night watch. These are the men paid, poorly, to walk the streets, carrying lanterns and cudgels, making sure no one is breaking into shops or setting fires. They are the reason you feel safe enough to close your eyes. In a city built of wood and filled with open flames, the watch is less about crime and more about fire prevention. If they see a glow in a window that looks too bright, they will bang on the door until the owner douses it. The rushlight flickers and dies, plunging the room back into absolute darkness. The jug is finished. The toast has been eaten. The group disperses back to their respective patches of straw. You lie back down. The ale has made your limbs feel heavy and pleasant. The spices from the gingerbread are still a faint warmth in your stomach. But as you drift off, you aren't expecting to sleep through the night. This brings us to the second sleep. You see, in the pre-industrial world, sleep was often biphasic. People would go to bed around sundown, which in winter is very early, maybe 5 o'clock p.m. or 6 o'clock p.m. They would sleep for about 4 hours. Then, around midnight or 1 o'clock a.m., they would wake up naturally. This period of wakefulness was called the watch, or simply waking. People didn't just toss and turn, they used this time. In the dark, they would pray, reflect on their dreams, have quiet conversations with their bedmates, or, let's be honest, engage in the kind of activities that lead to larger families. It was a recognized, distinct part of the night. After an hour or so of this quiet wakefulness, they would go back to sleep for their second sleep, until dawn. So, as you close your eyes now, you aren't saying goodbye to the world for 8 hours. You are just taking a nap before the midnight intermission. You are in tune with the natural rhythm of the sun and the season. The city outside is now truly silent. The only sound is the wind rattling the shutters and the distant, mournful bark of a stray dog, maybe the same one that cleaned your hands this morning. The fast food ecosystem has shut down. The fires under the cauldrons are gray ash. The spits are stationary. The gingerbread knights are locked in boxes. The eels are sleeping in the mud of the Thames. You pull the wool blanket up over your ear to block out the draft. The straw mattress conforms to your body. It's not a memory foam mattress, but after a day of walking on cobblestones and standing in mud, it feels like a cloud. You think back on the flavors of the day, the salty shock of the pretzel, the rich gamey grease of the sheep's trotter, the exotic perfume of the saffron pastry, the sharp, sugary crunch of the anise seed. You have tasted the world, right here in the dirty, crowded, magnificent city. Your breathing slows. The digestive fire in your stomach simmers down to a gentle ember. The humors in your body are slowly balancing out, or at least calling a truce for the night. You are a medieval urbanite, a survivor of the streets, and you have been fed. The day is done. The narrative is complete. Now, as promised, here is the wind down to help you transition from the history lesson to sleep. Now, let the image of the medieval city fade. Let the bustling crowds and the shouting vendors dissolve into mist. The heavy smells of wood smoke and spices drift away, carried off by a gentle, cleaning breeze. Imagine the city from high above. The fires are all extinguished one by one, like candles being blown out. The narrow streets, once so noisy and chaotic, are now peaceful rivers of shadow. The timber houses are quiet, their shutters closed against the night. The great stone cathedral stands silent, watching over the sleeping town. Bring your attention back to yourself. You are not on a straw mattress. You are not cold. You are in your own bed, safe and warm. Feel the softness of your pillow supporting your head. Feel the weight of your blankets, not scratchy wool, but soft and comforting, holding you in a secure embrace. Your body is heavy, relaxed, sinking deeper into the mattress. All the walking, all the noise, all the activity of the day is gone. There is nothing you need to do. There is no curfew bell to wait for. There is no fire to tend. The world is safe, and it is time to rest. Take a slow, deep breath. Inhale the clean, cool air of your own room. Exhale, thus the day. The history is written, the past is asleep, and now you can join it in that quiet, peaceful space of rest. Let the darkness be soft and welcoming. Let the silence be a comfort. Drift, float, sleep.